Hi everyone. So today we're going to explore something brand new for us. It is called HMH. It's a resource available to us on Class Link. So here is my Class Link. It will look similar to yours, but probably a little different. But it's similar. Here's Zello, Star, IXL, vocabulary, right? You know these things. What I want to focus on today is right here. It's this little black square with a happy guy. It says Ed on it. HMH is, I'll probably refer to it most of the time as HMH. This is the resource that we're going to use today. So if you click on this, if I were to click on it, it would take me to a teacher version, which looks different from the student version. So just let me tell you what to expect. When you click on it, it should have your class on there. It should have young adult literature. And in young adult literature, it should have right now 2 assignments. The first assignment we're going to do is get ready. So we're going to read a personal essay by Ishmael Bey called Unusual Normality. And this is where we're going to read the essay. This is where we're going to do the work. It's all in here together. So we won't have to be flipping from site to site or whatever. It'll all be in here. All right. So we are going to, I guess, just get into it. I'm going to walk you through this a little bit because we've never been in here. One thing I can tell you about this is there is some reading that you'll have to do. There's information, like things for you to learn. And the only way to learn them is to read them or listen to me talk about them. So it's tempting, if you were to get in here and not watch the video, to just scroll down and look for something to do. Like, oh, this looks like I need to do something here, so I'm just going to do this. And ignore all the other stuff. I wouldn't recommend doing that because you're going to need to know this stuff at some point, and then you're going to be lost because you didn't read it or listen to me talk about it. So pay attention to all the words on the page. Sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's a little, but we'll get through it. All right, so quick start. This is just something to get us thinking. So they're talking about oxymorons here. And the title of the essay, Unusual Normality, is an oxymoron. So an oxymoron is when we take 2 words that seem to be opposites and we put them together to mean something. Like maybe you've heard of jumbo shrimp. Jumbo, we imagine something very large. Shrimp, we imagine something very small, like a shrimp, like a short, tiny little person or something. So jumbo shrimp is an oxymoron. Unusual normality, the name of this essay, is an oxymoron. Unusual and normal seem to be opposites, right? So that's an oxymoron. All right, we are going to, as we read this, analyze purpose and message. So what is the author's purpose? Why did the author write this? Did the author write this just to entertain us? Did he write it to persuade us, like to talk us into something? Did he write it to express his thoughts and feelings or to, I don't know, something else, right? So that's author's purpose. When you hear your English teacher and see in HMH them talk about author's purpose, it's why did the author write this? What was the purpose in doing it? The message is the central idea of the work. So you can see before I get into that, I'm skipping some of this, not because it's not important, but because you'll read it yourself. And this video will go on for 100 years if I talk in detail about everything. And I'm guessing you don't want this video to go on for 100 years. So these are the things that you're going to need to do, right, in order to determine author's purpose. And we'll get into it when we actually do it. Something else I want you to know is the message. The message is the central idea of the work. What is the author trying to communicate to the audience? All right, and here's some things that we have to do to understand what the message is. And another thing is the audience. What is the audience when we talk about literature? The audience is the people for whom the author is writing. So are you writing for a group of kindergartners? Right? That you're going to write very differently than if you're writing for, I don't know, let's say a college professor. Are you writing for someone who has never read the story before, like I ask you to when we summarize? Pretend you're writing this for someone who's never read the story before, right? You have to consider your audience because it will change the way you write. And it's important to think about, who did this author write for? Am I going to understand an essay that was written by a doctor for other doctors? Probably not, because if they're writing for other doctors, they're not going to take the time to explain all the medical jargon. But if they're writing it for a high school student, I can probably understand it, because now they're not going to be using medical terminology. They're going to be using regular words. All right. So anyway, it's important to understand your author's audience. Who did they write this for? Who are they trying to reach? All right. Analyzing voice and tone. So voice and tone are parts of the author's style. So the author's style, their style of writing. Have you ever read something and you're like, I just don't like the way this guy writes? Or you read something and you're like, oh my gosh, I just love the way they write. That's their style. And it's very personal to the author, and it's personal to the reader. So what makes up their style in large part is voice and tone. So voice is a writer's unique use of language. How do they use language? It might be how they structure their sentences. That's syntax. Do they write long, fancy, wordy sentences? Do they use a lot of short, choppy sentences? Right? Maybe it's their word choice, right? We call that diction. So there's lots of words in the English language. You can choose many different words to say the same thing, right? And then tone, too. Tone is the author's attitude toward their subject. So are they feeling playful toward the subject? Are they taking it very seriously? Is the author offended by this? Is the author celebrating something, right? So what is their tone? What is their sort of attitude about what they're writing? And here you can see some examples of literary elements. All right, your work today is really just getting to know HMH a little bit, and you're going to do one teeny tiny little thing of writing here. So here, you're going to look at some vocabulary. So these 4 words: rehabilitation, counterparts, stereotype, and naive. To see how many critical vocabulary words you already know, write a brief answer to these questions. There are 4 of them here: 1, 2, 3, and 4. So here's the first one. What might rehabilitation for a broken leg involve? So we're just looking to see, do you know what rehabilitation means? Can you use it in a real life situation? So here you're going to type, you don't have to type a ton, a couple sentences will probably take care of it. But do be mindful of those basic requirements in writing. We talk about those all the time in this class. Write incomplete sentences, avoid fragments and run-ons. Make sure you're capitalizing properly. So sentences should start with a capital letter. They should end with a period almost always, sometimes a question mark. You should avoid slang and profanity and text speak, right? You're writing formally. Those things are perfectly fine in other situations. So I write gonna in my texts all the time, or cuz, C-U-Z, in my text because it's fast and it's easy, right? But in formal writing, there's no place for that. So make sure that you're meeting those basic requirements of writing that we've talked about so many times. And you'll answer here, you'll click number 2, and it'll be a question about the next vocab word here, counterparts. What might be the counterparts of grandmothers? Now, this is not a test. If you don't know what the heck counterparts means, then look it up. You can look it up, that's fine, and then answer the question. Anyway, so you will go into 1, 2, 3, and 4 and answer all of those. And then down here, they're going to ask you or tell you about active and passive voice. So active and passive voice are just 2 ways of saying the same thing. You could make a statement and use active voice, or you could make a statement and use passive voice. Here's 2 examples. I think the examples will help you understand it more than the explanation. You can read this explanation if it'll help. But here we have the sentence, the boys played a game. This is how we see sentences most of the time. This is active voice. Here we have the subject boys, and then we have the predicate played. The boys played. All right. The focus here is on the action. It's on the boys. The subject boys is the focus. All right. Boys played. Here in passive voice, the sentence is almost flipped around and reversed. Instead of saying boys played, now we have now we have played boys. See how they're opposite? The game was played by the boys. Here the focus is on the game. The game is kind of the first thing we come across. And what about the game? Well, it was played. And boys is almost an afterthought. These two sentences say the same thing, but one is active voice, one is passive voice. Almost always active voice is preferred. There are some situations in which you may want to focus the reader's attention elsewhere, and so you will use the passive voice, but we almost always use active. It's really not asking you to do anything with that information yet, just know it, because we will do something with it later. And then it also gives you this little example of annotation. So annotation, if you don't already know what that is, it's when you write in a book or on a handout or something. So when you're reading, do you like to highlight certain things? Do you put notes in the margins? Do you circle something? Do you put a star next to something that's important? All those things are annotation. So they just gave you an example. We just right now want you to know what annotation is. So if we ask you to do it later, you'll know what it means. So here's an example. This person underlined these two sentences, and then you can click here to see the little note that they would have written. If we were doing paper and pencil, they would have written it right over here in the margin, right? But digitally, you can do it this way. And here's something else that was underlined and the note that they had with it. So really just the whole purpose of this is so that you understand what annotation means. Underlining, highlighting, circling, putting notes in the margins, marking up the paper as you read so that it reflects your thoughts that you have about what you're reading, any questions you might have about what you're reading, right? That's annotation. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of your assignment. So really the only work you actually have to do is this right here, this 1, 2, 3, 4 for these vocabulary words. However, it is important that you understand these other things. So especially look at things that are bolded, like oxymoron. You should know what that is now. You should know what author's purpose means. If I talk about the message of a text, you should understand what the message is. When we talk about the audience, right, voice and tone. So really focus in on those bolded areas. And your job today is to complete 1, 2, 3, and 4 here, and that's it. All right, if you have questions about this, please get hold of me. I'm happy to help you out with it in any way I can. Have a good day.